He was a man who turned ruins into empires and never lost a negotiation. She was the woman no man had managed to conquer. But what happens when a ruthless duke makes a dangerous wager with the only woman capable of beating him? And what if the prize is something neither of them was prepared to risk? Their own heart. If you love stories of tension, seduction, and power games, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any chapter of this irresistible passion. The London night unfolded in layers of golden light and whispering silk. The Huntington ballroom was bustling with the cream of the aristocracy, ladies adorned like living jewels, gentlemen measuring fortunes and influences with every calculated handshake. The scent of fresh roses mingled with beeswax candles, and the expensive perfume that floated like unkept promises through the warm air. Olivia Evercrest stood on the edge of that social dance, a study in elegant composure. Her emerald green silk dress, chosen not for fashion, but for the way it enhanced the amber color of her eyes, was discreet in ornamentation, but impeccable in cut. She didn't need excessive frills or daring necklines. Her presence was enough. Beside her, Lady Genevieve Ashford, her friend since childhood, observed the crowd with that amused air of someone who knew all the secrets of the ballroom. "You're doing that thing again," Genevieve murmured, her hand-painted fan moving at a lazy pace. Olivia did not look away from a specific spot on the dance floor. "Doing what exactly?" "Studying him as if he were a puzzle you intend to solve before the night is over." Olivia allowed herself a discreet smile. There was no point in denying it. Her eyes had indeed repeatedly found and returned to the imposing figure of Dorian Langmere, Duke of Ashcroft. He stood near the French doors leading to the terrace, a forgotten glass of brandy in his hand as he spoke with Lord Hastings. But Olivia knew from the way his steel-grey eyes occasionally swept the room, from the posture that radiated absolute control, that Dorian Langmere was never completely distracted. He was a man who observed, calculated, and always acted with purpose. "You should be more careful, Liv," Genevieve warned, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "That man devours women like you for breakfast." Olivia turned to her friend, an eyebrow arched in challenge. "Then, I suppose he hasn't yet met one who gives him indigestion." Genevieve let out a muffled laugh behind her fan. "You are incorrigible. I'm just realistic." Olivia adjusted the satin glove that reached her elbow. "Men like the Duke of Ashcroft believe the world was built to bend to their whims. Someone needs to remind them that not everything is for sale. And you've nominated yourself for that thankless role. Someone has to do the job." But even as she spoke the words with that sharp certainty that had made her famous in social circles, Olivia felt something different settle in her chest. A restlessness, a dangerous curiosity, because Dorian Langmere was not like the other men who had tried to court her. He did not send exaggerated bouquets or mediocre poems. He didn't pursue her with empty compliments or promises of eternal devotion. In fact, he barely seemed to notice her existence. And this, Olivia recognized with a mixture of irritation and fascination, was precisely what intrigued her. At that exact moment, as if some invisible force had conspired against her, Dorian Langmere looked up from his conversation. His eyes cut through the crowd with the precision of a sharp blade and met hers. The impact was immediate, visceral. He didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply watched, as if he were assessing something he had just discovered. And then deliberately, his lips curved into a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes, a smile that was more challenge than courtesy. Olivia felt the heat rise in her throat, but maintained her impassive expression. She lifted her chin slightly, a gesture that in any social language meant only one thing. "I am not intimidated by you." He tilted his head, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement. And then, to her absolute astonishment and slight alarm, Dorian Langmere handed the brandy glass back to a passing servant and began walking toward her. "My God," Genevieve whispered beside her. "He's coming this way." "I have eyes, Jenny. What are you going to do?" Olivia took a deep breath, her fingers lightly tightening on the ivory fan. "What I always do. Win." Dorian Langmere moved through the ballroom like a predator who didn't need to hurry. After all, his prey had nowhere to run. Gentlemen stepped out of his way with respectful nods. Ladies followed him with furtive glances, loaded with speculation and poorly concealed desire. He wasn't the most handsome man in the fold. There were younger lords with more delicate features and easier smiles, But there was something about Dorian that made all of that irrelevant. It was the bearing of a man who had built an empire from the ground up. It was the way his eyes seemed to see through the masks everyone wore. It was the silent danger that emanated from him like an invisible perfume. When he finally stopped before Olivia, the space between them seemed to shrink and expand at the same time. "Miss Evercrest." His voice was deep, polished, but there was an undercurrent of something darker. He executed an impeccable bow, but his eyes never left hers. "I hear you collect broken hearts." Olivia did not allow the shock of his direct approach to unbalance her. Instead, she offered him a courteous, lethal smile. "And I hear your grace collects failing companies to rebuild them at your pleasure." She tilted her head, the movement as elegant as it was calculated. "I suppose we both have questionable hobbies." A flash of genuine amusement crossed his eyes. Genevieve, realizing her presence had become superfluous, or perhaps wisely uncomfortable, mumbled some excuse and disappeared into the crowd. Dorian took a step closer, reducing the socially acceptable distance to the minimum necessary not to cause a scandal. "I must correct the rumors then, Miss Evercrest. I don't collect failing companies. I transform them." His voice dropped just enough so only she could hear. "There's a crucial difference between destruction and renewal." What a benevolent view. Olivia did not back down, holding her ground. "Although I wonder if the companies in question appreciate being dismantled before being rebuilt in your grace's image and likeness. Only the weak resist. The strong recognize an opportunity when they see one. Or perhaps they just recognize when they have no choice." He smiled then, a slow, dangerous smile that made something dangerously vibrate in the center of Olivia's chest. "You enjoy challenges, Miss Evercrest. That is rare. And your grace enjoys winning. That is predictable." His smile widened. "Touché." Dorian vaguely gestured to the dance floor, where couples twirled in perfectly choreographed waltzes. "Shall I assume your verbal audacity extends to the ballrooms as well, or do you limit your rebellion to sharp conversation?" It was an invitation, and they both knew it. Olivia considered her options. She could refuse, maintain the safe distance she had established with all other suitors over the years. Or she could accept the challenge from this impossible man and discover exactly what happened when someone provoked a duke known for never losing. The choice, she realized, was made even before the question. "I never back down from a dance, Your Grace." She extended her gloved hand. "But I must warn you, I do not follow easily." He took her hand, and even through the layers of fabric, Olivia felt his heat. Perfect. Dorian led her onto the floor with a confidence bordering on arrogance. "I have no interest in docile partners." And then they were dancing. The waltz was an elegant torture. Every movement brought them closer and pulled them apart at a rhythm that seemed designed to cause frustration. His hand on her waist was firm, appropriate, but Olivia could feel the weight and heat through the layers of silk. Their intertwined fingers seemed to conduct a parallel conversation, a language of subtle pressures and unspoken promises. "You dance well," Dorian murmured when the music brought them dangerously close. "Surprised, Your Grace?" "Intrigued. There's a difference." "How many differences will I need to teach you tonight?" He chuckled, a low, genuine sound that resonated through his chest to her hands. "As many as you have the patience to demonstrate." When the music ended, Olivia expected him to escort her back to the side of the room. Instead, Dorian held her hand one moment longer, just long enough to ignite something between them. "There's a card room upstairs," he said, as if commenting on the weather. "Would you care for a game of cards, Miss Evercrest? Or does your audacity have limits?" It was a clear provocation, and Olivia had never resisted provocations. "Your Grace underestimates me if you think a simple card game would intimidate me." "Excellent." The card room was smaller, more intimate. The idea lighting came from strategically placed candelabras that cast dancing shadows on the mahogany-paneled walls. A few other people were playing at distant tables, but Dorian chose one in the corner, private enough for a conversation without curious ears, but public enough to maintain appearances. They sat opposite each other. A servant brought the cards without being asked. "Shall we wager then?" Olivia asked, as Dorian shuffled with surprisingly skilled fingers. He studied her for a long moment before replying. 1 month. "Pardon?" "If I win this hand," Dorian began dealing the cards with precise movements, "you will spend 1 month by my side, as my social consultant." Olivia blinked, certain she had misheard. social consultant. I need to attend tedious season events, insipid dinners, endless balls, torturous opera performances. He raised his eyes from the cards, and there was a glint of challenge there. Your presence would make these obligations less tiresome. What a singular proposal. Olivia picked up her cards, examining them without revealing anything in her expression. And you presume I have nothing better to do than serve as your Grace's entertainment? I presume you are too curious to refuse. He wasn't wrong, and Olivia hated that he knew it. Very well. She arranged her cards with firm fingers. But if I win, you will finance my orphanage project for 1 year. Anonymously. No publicity, no credit, without your name ever being associated with it. Dorian paused, the cards suspended in the air. You run an orphanage? I am attempting to establish one, but gentlemen like your Grace tend to believe that a single woman lacks the necessary capacity or seriousness for such an undertaking. Her voice carried an acidity she didn't try to hide. Banks refuse to lend without a male relative's signature. My father is resistant to supporting what he calls a charitable fancy. Something shifted in Dorian's expression. It wasn't compassion. Olivia would have detected and scorned that immediately. It was recognition. I see. He played a card. And if you lose? Olivia met his eyes, refusing to look away. Then I will fulfill my part of the agreement. No. Dorian leaned forward, and the intensity in his gaze made her heart race. When I win, Olivia Evercrest, you will admit something that we both already know, but that you refuse to confess. And what would that be? He smiled. Slow, dangerous, devastating. That you desire much more than just taunts. The silence that followed was charged with an electricity that made the air feel thicker. Olivia should have stood up. She should have put an end to this madness before it went too far. But there was something hypnotic about this game, and it wasn't just about cards. I accept. Her voice came out huskier than she intended. They played. Olivia played well. Years of observing the men in her family had taught her the strategies, the nuances, the bluffs. But Dorian played as if he were born with the cards in his hands. Except on that night. For although Dorian was brilliant, Olivia was impeccable. When she placed the final card on the table, his eyes widened in genuine surprise. You cheated, he said teasingly, but there was admiration in his voice. I did not cheat. Olivia allowed herself a triumphant smile. I simply played better than your Grace. A new experience for the invincible Duke, I imagine. Dorian leaned back in his chair, studying her with renewed interest. Fascinating. So, the orphanage? He nodded slowly. It will have its funds for 1 year, anonymously, as requested. A pause. Olivia felt her heart pound, not because of the victory, but because of what she gave up by winning. Because, as absurd as it was, a part of her wanted to know what it would be like to spend that month by his side. Not as a consultant, but as something she dared not name. Her triumph tasted sweet in her mouth and carried an indecent touch of disappointment. Dorian noticed. Of course he noticed. But this does not end our game, he said, rising and offering her his hand. Olivia lifted her chin. No, no. His gaze swept over her face as if studying her from within. In fact, it is only beginning. Because you see, I never lose twice. Besides, rematches have always been disciplinary, and I have an interest in disciplining you. Properly, Miss Evercrest. A warmth rose up her spine. And what do you desire from this rematch, Your Grace? I keep my proposal. His voice was pure provocation. 1 month, you by my side. Olivia held his gaze. And what do I gain from it? Dorian's eyes flashed dangerously. I double your wager. Double? She repeated, trying to maintain her composure. 2 years of funding for your orphanage. Complete. Without restrictions. Her stomach lurched. Not just for the orphanage, but because of the way he wanted her there. As if that month were less of a wager and more of a promise. Your Grace, she began, but her voice failed. He leaned closer, just enough that the air between them felt too hot. Accept, he murmured, his voice low like a sin whispered in the dark. Or admit you are afraid. Olivia smiled, slow, venomous, irresistible. Fear is not the word I would choose. But, as she spoke, Dorian laid the cards, and they played. Olivia continued to win, again with a confident smile on her beautiful face. But then Dorian placed the last card on the table, a clean play, precise, devastating. For a second, Olivia remained motionless. There was no possible protest. He had beaten her, and made it look inevitable. Dorian leaned back in his chair with the calculated delicacy of one who savors every detail of their own victory. "I see you understand," he said, his voice charged with serene pleasure. "The rematch is over, and as I said, I never lose twice." Olivia lifted her chin, proud even in failure. "It appears so, Your Grace." He stood and offered her his hand. When she touched it, she noticed the subtlety. It wasn't a gesture of courtesy. It was one of possession, even if only for a month. As soon as she was standing, he leaned in almost imperceptibly, just enough so no one but her could hear. "Starting tomorrow," he said, each word resting in the air like warm wine. "I will send you punctually the dates, times of our engagements, necessities of our consultancy." The word consultancy came out with a delicious irony. "Necessities?" she repeated, with an arched eyebrow. His smile was slow, an invitation and a challenge all at once. "Yes." He let his gaze slide over her face with contained intensity. "Some of them, I fear, require your integral presence." Olivia took a deep breath to disguise the internal tremor and replied in the same tone. "Then I hope Your Grace is as disciplined as he demands of his engagements." He stared at her for a long moment, satisfied, predatory, and utterly fascinated. "You will see for yourself, Miss Evercrest. It is only the beginning." And there, in the thick silence that formed between them, Olivia understood that she wasn't the only one who had entered a dangerous game. He smiled, slow and dangerous. And when he smiled, that smile that promised storms and challenges, Olivia knew she had just initiated something much bigger than a simple wager. But what Olivia didn't know was that Dorian Langmere had a plan much more dangerous than she imagined, and as the days unfolded, the game between them would become much more than a simple dispute of egos. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any move in this duel where the line between victory and surrender is about to completely disappear. 3 days had passed since the night of the wager. 3 days in which Olivia had received, promptly every morning, a sealed note with the Langmere crest. Each message contained only practical details: time, location, nature of the engagement. No personal words, no provocation. And that, paradoxically, irritated her more than any exaggerated flirtation. On this specific morning, the note summoned her to something completely unexpected. Ashcroft House, 10 o'clock, investment meeting, formal day attire, DL. Olivia reread the message 3 times, looking for some hidden meaning. A business meeting? He really intended to take her to a business meeting. The Duke was truly no ordinary man. Now, standing on the threshold of the Ashcroft House library, an imposing room with bookshelves soaring to a frescoed ceiling, antique globes strategically placed, and the aroma of bound leather and expensive ink, Olivia understood the nature of the test. There were 6 men in the room, all middle-aged or older, all dressed with the sobriety of those carrying fortunes on their backs, and all without exception looked at her with the same expression upon seeing her enter, surprise followed by poorly concealed disdain. Dorian stood beside an unlit fireplace, one hand in the pocket of his impeccably cut waistcoat, the other holding documents he studied with casual attention. When Olivia entered, he looked up, and for a fraction of a second, she caught something that might have been approval. "Gentlemen," Dorian announced with that voice that naturally commanded attention, "allow me to introduce Miss Olivia Evercrest. She will be assisting me in the evaluation of certain investment opportunities." The silence that followed was thick. Sir Edmund Pemberton, a corpulent man with excessively waxed moustaches, was the first to react. "Your Grace," his voice carried the condescension of one who believes he is being reasonable. "With all respect, but financial matters of such magnitude, well, they are not suited to the delicate female constitution." Olivia felt the familiar anger boil beneath her skin, but maintained a perfectly serene expression. She had expected this. "Sir Pemberton." She moved into the room with the grace of one who knew exactly her worth. "How touching your consideration for my delicate constitution. I can assure you it handles the complexity of basic mathematics perfectly well." One of the younger men, Lord Ashford choked on the wine he had just sipped. Pemberton coloured. "I did not mean to imply—" "Of course not." Olivia accepted the chair a discreet servant had brought, positioning it strategically between Dorian and the investors. "Now, gentlemen, I understand we are here to discuss the proposal for investment in the Northern Railways. Correct?" Dorian observed everything with a neutral expression, but Olivia knew that glint in his eyes. He was enjoying himself. Pemberton, recovering, cleared his throat. "Yes, well, the proposal involves a 40-mile extension of railway line, connecting Manchester to Leeds. The initial investment would be approximately £80,000, with a projected return of 15% per annum after the third year of operation." 15%? Olivia tilted her head, feigning consideration. "Interesting. And does that calculation include the maintenance costs of the locomotives, the parliamentary licensing fees, compensation to landowners along the proposed route?" Pemberton blinked. Well, naturally. Because if it does," Olivia continued, her voice maintaining that perfectly polite tone that made every word more cutting, "then the 15% projection seems optimistic. I would venture to say your last audit showed significantly lower numbers, Sir Pemberton. Something closer to 8%, if my memory serves me correctly." The silence in the room became absolute. Pemberton opened and closed his mouth like a fish out of water. "How? Where did— The annual reports are public documents, sir." Olivia offered a sweet smile. "One simply needs to know where to look and have the patience to read beyond the executive summaries." Lord Ashford burst into laughter, pounding on the table. "By God, Langmere, where did you unearth this magnificent creature?" Dorian, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, finally moved. He approached the table, placing the documents he was holding before the investors. "Miss Evercrest raises valid points." His voice was neutral, but there was an undercurrent of something dangerous. "I suggest we review the numbers before proceeding." The meeting stretched on for another 2 hours, and with every question Olivia posed, always polite, always devastatingly precise, the men's expressions shifted from disdain to reluctant respect, and finally to something akin to cautious admiration. When the discussions finally concluded, and the investors began to withdraw, Pemberton stopped before Olivia. "Miss Evercrest," he hesitated, clearly fighting against years of ingrained prejudice, "your observations were illuminating. Perhaps I was hasty in my initial assumptions." "Perhaps, sir." Olivia accepted the near apology with a gracious nod. When the room finally emptied, leaving only her and Dorian, the silence seemed to expand. He remained by the fireplace, watching her with that intensity that made her skin tingle. "You are dangerous," Dorian said finally. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "Because I can count, Your Grace. Because you are far more intelligent than you allow people to realize." He took a step toward her. "And you use that as a weapon. I have learned that at times it is the only weapon a woman possesses." Something passed through his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. "You don't need to hide that from me, Olivia." The use of her first name, without title or formality, sent a shiver down her spine. "I am not hiding anything." "No?" He was dangerously close now. "Then why do I feel that every word you speak is carefully calculated to maintain distance?" Olivia held his gaze. "Perhaps because it is exactly that." "And why would you do such a thing?" She smiled, but it was a sad smile. "Because men like you, Your Grace, are the most dangerous of all." "Why?" "Because they make a woman believe she can lower her guard." Olivia picked up her gloves, preparing to leave. "And then, when she finally does, they destroy her." She began to walk away, but his voice stopped her. "Olivia." She paused, but did not turn around. "I will not destroy you," Dorian said, and there was a quality in his voice she had never heard before, something close to vulnerability. "But I'm beginning to fear that you might destroy me." Olivia closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the dangerous temptation to believe those words. Then, without answering, she left the library, leaving him alone with the unspoken promise hanging between them. The dawn at the Langmere country estate was a symphony of golds and greens. The mist still clung to the valleys like a diaphanous veil, and the air carried the scent of damp earth and dew on the tall grass. Olivia took a deep breath, letting the peace of that untouched landscape calm something restless inside her. She had arrived at the estate the night before, accompanied by her companion, Mrs. Dalton, a respectable middle-aged widow whose presence guaranteed the propriety required by society. The house itself was magnificent, a previous century construction, all light stone, with formal gardens that stretched as far as the eye could see. But Olivia wasn't there for the views. Dorian had sent another note, this one even more cryptic. Bring riding clothes. We need to talk away from curious ears. Now, dressed in her hunter green riding habit, cut to allow her to ride like men, with trousers discreetly hidden beneath the divided skirt. Olivia waited in the stables while a groom prepared her mare. She's temperamental, miss, the young stable boy warned her, stroking the muzzle of the beautiful cinnamon-colored mare. She doesn't like strangers. Olivia held out her hand, allowing the animal to sniff her. Then we have something in common. The mare snorted, but accepted the touch. In minutes, Olivia was mounted, adjusting the reins with experienced hands. Impressive. Dorian's voice came from behind her. Olivia turned in the saddle. He was mounted on a magnificent black stallion, controlling the powerful animal with casual ease. Dressed informally, linen shirt, leather waistcoat, high boots, there was something different about him. Less duke, more man. Did your grace presume I could not ride? I presumed you could do many things, Olivia. He guided the stallion closer. But I admit I expected more restraint. Restraint is tedious, he smiled. That slow smile that did dangerous things to her heart rate. On that point we agree. Without another word, he spurred the stallion and galloped off across the open field. Olivia did not hesitate. Leaning over the mare's neck, she gave her the freedom to run. The wind whipped across her face, undoing her careful hairstyle, pulling out pins. Her hair flew behind her like a battle flag. The world narrowed to the thunder of hooves, the power of the animal beneath her, the pure adrenaline of speed and freedom. She caught up with Dorian in a clearing surrounded by ancient oaks, where a lazy stream meandered between moss-covered stones. He had already dismounted, tying the stallion's reins to a low branch. When Olivia slowed her mare, he came toward her. "Allow me," he said, extending his hands to help her dismount. Olivia hesitated only a second before accepting. Her hands found his shoulders for balance, and then his hands encircled her waist. Firm, warm even through the layers of fabric. The dismount was slow, deliberately slow. When her feet finally touched the ground, Olivia realized he had not released her waist, and she had not removed her hands from his shoulders. They were dangerously close. "You're trembling," Dorian murmured, his steel-grey eyes fixed on hers. "It's the—" Olivia swallowed hard. "It's the wind." He raised an eyebrow, that damned half-smile touching his lips. "There is no wind here, Olivia." And he was right. The air in the clearing was absolutely still, as if the world itself were holding its breath. "Then perhaps it's the excitement of the ride," she replied, forcing firmness into her voice. "Perhaps." But his tone made it clear he didn't believe it. He took a step back, releasing her, and Olivia immediately felt the loss of that warmth. Dorian walked to the stream, picking up a flat stone and throwing it to make it skip across the surface. 3 perfect skips before sinking. "I didn't bring you here just to ride," he said without looking at her. "I gathered that." Olivia joined him at the stream's edge. "So, what is the true purpose of this meeting?" He finally turned to face her. "I want to understand you." The raw honesty of the statement disarmed her. "Why?" "Because you are an enigma I cannot solve." His voice was low, almost frustrated. "You play my game with a skill you shouldn't possess. Dismantle powerful men with a polite smile. Ride as if you were born in the saddle. And yet, every time I get too close you pull back, as if I were some kind of threat." Olivia looked away, focusing on the stream's clear waters. "Perhaps because you are." "Explain." She took a deep breath, deciding that for once she would be honest. "Men like you, Dorian Langmere, are accustomed to conquering. Companies, fortunes, women, everything is just another territory to be dominated." She looked at him again. "And I refuse to be conquered. Conquest is not what I seek." "No? Then what do you seek?" He took a step toward her, closing the distance she had created. "Something far more dangerous." His voice was a husky whisper. "A partnership, a constant challenge. Someone who will not bow, who will not break, who will face me every step of the way." Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. "That doesn't exist. Eventually one of us would have to yield. Or—" He raised his hand, lightly touching a strand of hair the wind had freed, wrapping it delicately around his finger. Both of us could learn that there is more strength in yielding together than in remaining separate and inflexible. Olivia felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. You speak of surrender. I speak of choice. He released her hair, but his fingers traced a soft line along her cheek. I could force you to comply with our wager, but I do not want your presence out of obligation, Olivia. I want it because you choose to be here. And if I choose not to be, something dark passed over his face. Then you are free to leave, and I will never trouble you again. It was a promise, and Olivia knew Dorian Langmere was a man of his word. What terrified her was the realization that the last thing she desired was to leave. I need to think, she whispered. Then think. He backed away, giving her space. But Olivia, she looked at him. When you make your decision, make sure you are being honest with yourself about what you truly want. And then he walked away, returning to the horses, leaving her alone with the sound of the stream and the turmoil of her own heart. The Hartford dining hall was the personification of aristocratic excess. Crystals hung from enormous chandeliers, French tapestries adorned the walls, and a table so long that guests at the ends practically needed binoculars to see one another. Olivia was seated between Lord Thomas Hartford, the host, a man in his early 30s known for his easy charm and considerable fortune, and an elderly matron who had spent the last 20 minutes describing, in excruciating detail, the virtues of her pet Maltese. Dorian was on the opposite side of the table, several seats to the left, but Olivia could feel his eyes on her at regular intervals. Miss Evercrest, Lord Hartford said, leaning toward her with a smile that likely melted less cautious hearts. I must say, your presence is the only element that makes this dinner tolerable. Olivia smiled politely. Very kind of you, Lord Hartford, though I fear you are underselling your cook's excellent work. He chuckled, a rich, genuine sound. Charming diplomacy. But you see, when a man spends months attempting to capture the attention of the most intriguing woman in London, only to find she accepts the company of another gentleman, well, a certain bitterness is forgivable. Ah, so that was it. Olivia took a sip of wine, considering her words carefully. Lord Hartford, if you are referring to the Duke of Ashcroft, I must clarify that our association is purely circumstantial. Circumstantial. He tested the word as if it were exotic. What a curious term to describe what everyone observed at the Huntington ball. And what exactly did everyone observe? A spark. Hartford leaned closer, his voice lowering to something more intimate. The kind of spark that either consumes everything around it or quickly extinguishes. And I am betting, Miss Evercrest, that you are too intelligent to allow yourself to be consumed. It was a clear proposition, and a calculated one. Olivia cast a quick glance in Dorian's direction. He was engaged in conversation with the lady on his right, but there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there moments before. He was listening. A dangerous and probably foolish idea formed in Olivia's mind. She wanted to know, needed to know. If Dorian felt the same warm intensity she did. If what pulsed between them was real or just the product of her overstimulated imagination. There was a way to find out. Lord Hartford, she said, allowing a smile to play on her lips. I think you underestimate me if you believe any spark, no matter how bright, could consume me without my consent. His eyes lit up with renewed interest. So you are saying there is room for other possibilities? I am saying a sensible woman keeps her options open. It was a lie, of course, but it was said loudly enough for Dorian to hear. And when Olivia finally allowed herself to look in his direction again, she found him watching her with an intensity that made something contract dangerously in her stomach. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more primal, more possessive. It was jealousy. The realization sent a wave of power through her. Dorian Langmere, the man who supposedly never lost control, was jealous. For the rest of the dinner, Olivia maintained an animated conversation with Hartford, laughing at his jokes, accepting compliments with practiced grace. And with every interaction, she could feel Dorian's gaze intensifying. When the guests finally moved to the music room, Olivia found herself momentarily alone in a quiet corridor, admiring a portrait of a somber Hartford ancestor. You are playing with fire. Dorian's voice came from behind her, low and dangerous. Olivia did not turn around. I don't know what you are referring to, Your Grace. He moved, positioning himself beside her, too close to be casual. Hartford. The word came out like an accusation. He was an attentive host. He was flirting with you. Now Olivia turned, meeting those stormy grey eyes. And does that bother your grace? Yes. The answer was immediate, without hesitation. Why? Dorian took a step closer, and Olivia felt her back touch the cold wall. Because you are mine. The words should have offended her. They should have aroused her feminist fury. Instead, they sent liquid heat through her veins. I am yours? She arched an eyebrow, refusing to be intimidated. I do not recall agreeing to such terms. You don't need to agree. His voice was pure dark velvet. You know it's true, just as I know that every smile you offered Hartford tonight was calculated to provoke me. Olivia raised her chin defiantly. How arrogant to presume. It's not arrogance when... It's right. He raised his hand, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a lightness that contrasted with the intensity in his eyes. You wanted to see if I would react, and now you have your answer. Olivia's heart beat so hard she was sure he could hear it. And what is the answer? Dorian leaned in, his lips almost touching her ear. That I do not share. Ever. And the sooner you accept that, the easier it will be for both of us. Then, before she could respond, he stepped back, leaving her trembling and absolutely certain of one thing. She had awakened something dangerous, and there was no turning back. The following afternoon found Olivia and Genevieve in the private conservatory of the Evercrest residence, a glass and light space where exotic orchids competed for attention with rare roses and aromatic jasmine. It was Olivia's favorite retreat, a place where she could think without interruption. Genevieve watched her friend with poorly disguised concern as Olivia feigned extreme concentration on an orchid that definitely didn't need so much attention. You're going to pull the petals off if you keep that up, Genevieve finally said. Olivia released the flower. Sorry, I'm distracted. Distracted, Genevieve crossed her arms. Darling, you are utterly tormented, and we both know by whom. Olivia sighed, collapsing onto a wrought iron bench covered with velvet cushions. Jenny, I'm in terrible trouble. Oh dear. Genevieve sat beside her, taking her hand. Tell me. The words gushed out like a burst dam. He looks at me as if he can decipher me, layer by layer, as if every defense I've built up over the years is transparent to him. Olivia squeezed her friend's hand. And the worst part, Jenny, the worst part is that I'm afraid he can. And even more terrifying, I want him to. Genevieve was silent for a moment, processing. You are falling in love with him. No. The denial came too fast. Too loud. I can't be. It would be absurd. Why? Because men like Dorian Langmere don't fall in love, Jenny. They conquer, they possess, and when they tire, they discard. Olivia stood up, walking to the glass wall, watching the garden beyond. I cannot allow myself to be another one of his conquests. Genevieve joined her. What if he's different? What if you are different to him? How can I know? You risk it. Genevieve touched her friend's shoulder. True love has always been a risk, Liv. The question is not whether you can avoid danger, but whether it's worth risking. Olivia closed her eyes. What if I fall and he doesn't catch me? Then you get up, as you always have. Genevieve smiled. But what if he does catch you? What if for the first time you don't have to get up alone? It was a possibility Olivia had not allowed herself to consider, and now, with her friend's words echoing in her mind, she couldn't think of anything else. Dorian was in no better state. He and Sebastian were at the private club they had frequented since university, a discreet establishment where men of power could relax away from prying eyes, expensive brandy, imported cigars, and comfortable silences. Except the silence was anything but comfortable tonight. You're going to wear a hole in the carpet if you keep pacing, Sebastian observed from the comfort of his leather armchair. Dorian stopped, realizing that he was indeed pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Apologies. You don't have to apologize to me. Sebastian took a sip of brandy. But perhaps you should apologize to whoever has turned the Duke of Ashcroft, known for his glacial control, into this agitated mess. Dorian glared at him. I am not a mess. Of course not. Sebastian's tone was pure irony. It's perfectly normal that you have checked your watch 6 times in the last half hour, downed 3 brandies in rapid succession, and practically bit the head off a poor waiter who had the audacity to ask if you wished to dine. Dorian slumped into the opposite armchair. It's her. Obviously it's her. Sebastian leaned forward. The question, my friend, is, What do you intend to do about it? I don't know. The admission cost him. She's not like the others, Sebastian. Every time I think I'm gaining ground, she surprises me. She challenges me. She makes me question everything I thought I knew about. Everything. And that scares you. It doesn't scare me. A pause. It terrifies me. Sebastian laughed, but it was a gentle sound. Welcome to love, my friend. It is absolutely terrifying. It's not love, Dorian protested, but it sounded weak even to his own ears. It's fascination, intense attraction, intellectual respect. Keep convincing yourself of that. Sebastian finished his brandy. In the meantime, may I point out that the longer you keep her close, the more you realize you cannot let her go? Dorian remained silent. Exactly. Sebastian stood up, adjusting his coat. So my unsolicited advice is, stop fighting the inevitable. You've already lost this game, Dorian. The only question now is whether you are man enough to admit it. And with that, Sebastian left, leaving Dorian alone with his turbulent thoughts and the growing certainty that his friend was absolutely correct. He had lost. The question was, what would the prize be? The game between Dorian and Olivia had transformed into something much deeper and more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. But when secrets from the past emerge and determined rivals appear, they will discover that the biggest challenge is not winning against each other, but protecting what is growing between them. Stay with us to discover if love can flourish amidst pride, fear, and the expectations of a ruthless society. Morning arrived with a fine mist that enveloped the streets of London like a veil of mystery. Olivia adjusted the shawl over her shoulders as the discreet carriage, not the Evercrests but one purposely rented plane, traversed the poorer districts of the city. The streets here were narrow, the buildings leaned against each other like tired old men, and the smell of soot mixed with something more human, more desperate. Mrs. Dalton, her companion, watched through the window with visible discomfort. Miss Olivia, your mother would never approve of you coming to this side of town. My mother is not here to approve or disapprove, Olivia replied softly, but there was a firmness in her voice that ended the matter. The carriage stopped before a 3-story building that had once been a boarding house, but now sported a discreet sign, House of Hope for Children. It was modest. The walls needed fresh paint, but the windows were clean and there were flower boxes on the sills. Small touches that transformed that place of abandonment into something close to a home. Olivia stepped down from the carriage, and immediately the front door opened, revealing a stout, middle-aged woman with a warm smile. Miss Evercrest, the woman hurried toward her. We weren't expecting your visit today. Mrs. Fletcher, I hope I'm not causing any inconvenience. Olivia squeezed the woman's hands with genuine affection. I brought the provisions I promised. Books, fabric for clothing, and some sweets for the children. You are an angel, my dear. A true angel. Olivia laughed, but it was a humorless sound. Hardly, Mrs. Fletcher, but I try to do what I can. She spent the next few hours immersed in the orphanage's work. There were 23 children currently, ages ranging from 4 to 14, all orphaned or abandoned, all carrying stories that would break the hardest heart. Olivia knew each one by name, knew their stories, their fears, their small dreams that seemed impossible in this cruel world. She was in what they called the study room, a simple space with makeshift tables and a cracked chalkboard, helping a 7-year-old girl named Rose with her letters when she sensed the change in the air. A sudden silence, followed by anxious whispers. Olivia looked up, and her heart simply stopped. Dorian Langmere stood in the doorway, occupying the space with that presence impossible to ignore. But he was not the polished, impeccable duke of the ballrooms. His hair was slightly wind-tousled, his coat had a smudge of mud on the hem, and there was something in his expression, surprise, confusion, and something deeper she couldn't decipher. Your Grace. Olivia slowly stood up, her heart pounding erratically. What? How did you? I received information that there was an issue with the funding I promised. He entered the room, his eyes sweeping the space, the children watching him with a mixture of fear and curiosity. I came to verify personally. Imagine my surprise to discover that the project in question is this. Olivia felt her defenses automatically rise. This is an orphanage, Your Grace, a place where children who have no one can find safety, education, a chance for something better. If you consider such a thing unworthy of your investment—" "I didn't say that," he interrupted her, taking another step toward her. His voice was strange, almost husky. "Just, why did you never mention this? Why did you keep it a secret?" Olivia crossed her arms, a barrier against the vulnerability that threatened to overflow. "Because men like you, Your Grace, tend to see kindness as weakness, compassion as foolish sentimentality." She raised her chin. "I did not want your pity, nor your disapproval." Dorian was silent for a long moment, just watching her with that intensity that made her skin tingle. Then he spoke, and his words disarmed her completely. "I see it as the rarest thing I have ever found." She tried to breathe. Rare, not weak. For the first time, she feared not for her reputation, but for herself. Before Olivia could answer, Rose timidly tugged on her skirt. "Miss Livy, who is the big man?" Olivia blinked, forcing a smile. "This is the Duke of Ashcroft, Rose. He is a friend." "A duke?" The little girl's eyes widened, like in the fairy tales. Dorian, to Olivia's absolute astonishment, knelt down, placing himself at the child's eye level. "Exactly like in the fairy tales," he said, and there was a softness in his voice that Olivia had never heard before. "And what is your name, little one?" "Rose, Your Grace." The girl performed a clumsy curtsy that elicited a genuine smile from him. A beautiful name for a polite girl. He glanced around the room. "And you are studying letters?" Rose nodded vigorously. "Miss Livy says if we learn to read and write, we can be anything we want, even a queen." Miss Livy is absolutely correct. Olivia watched the scene with something painfully squeezing her chest. This man, this powerful, ruthless duke, was kneeling on the dirty floor of an orphanage, conversing with an orphaned child as if she were the most important person in the world. She had to look away, inexplicable tears stinging her eyes. Dorian spent another hour at the orphanage. He spoke with Mrs. Fletcher about the structural needs, examined the inadequate textbooks, observed the overcrowded accommodations, and when he finally said goodbye, he promised the director that he would send not only funds but also carpenters, materials, and everything else necessary. When they were finally alone outside, Mrs. Dalton discreetly waiting in the carriage, Dorian turned to Olivia. "Thank you for allowing me to see this. I had no choice. You showed up unannounced." "True," he smiled, but it was a gentle smile. "But you could have sent me away. You didn't." Olivia looked away, toward the dirty street where barefoot children played with whatever they could find. "They deserve more than this. They deserve real chances, true opportunities." Her voice wavered slightly. "They deserve to know that someone cares. And you care. Deeply." "Yes." She finally faced him. "I care." Dorian took a step closer, his voice lowering. "You are extraordinary, Olivia Evercrest, and I am starting to realize I have no idea of the depth of who you truly are." "Perhaps it is better that way," she whispered. "Or perhaps—" He lightly touched her face. Fleeting touch that made her shiver. It is exactly what makes this so impossible to resist. 2 weeks passed in a blur of social events, elaborate dinners, and stolen moments that felt simultaneously like too much and too little. The tension between Olivia and Dorian grew with every encounter, every prolonged gaze, every accidental touch that felt anything but accidental. And then came the night of the storm. Olivia had been invited to dine at Ashcroft House, a small gathering. Dorian had said, just a few close friends, but when she arrived she discovered that the other guests had sent last-minute apologies due to the increasingly threatening weather. Black clouds had swallowed the evening sky, and the wind howled like something wild. "It seems it is just the two of us," Dorian observed when they met in the library after a silent, tension-filled dinner. Olivia stood in front of the ceiling-high bookshelves, her fingers tracing the leather spines of the antique volumes. The fireplace crackled cheerfully, casting dancing shadows that transformed the room into something intimate, almost conspiratorial. "Mrs. Dalton is in the guest accommodations," she said, as if needing to remind them both of propriety. She insisted it would be improper to travel in this storm. Very sensible of her. Dorian poured 2 glasses of amber wine, offering one to her. "Though I suspect she is more concerned with comfort than propriety." Olivia accepted the glass, her fingers brushing against his for an electric moment. "Your Grace seems to have an impressive library." She needed something, anything, to fill the growing silence. My father's inheritance. There was an odd strain in his voice. He believed books were the only investment that never depreciated. A wise man. A foolish man. The bitterness in the declaration made Olivia turn to face him. How can you say such a thing? Dorian took a long swallow of the wine before answering, his eyes fixed on the flames. My father was an idealist. He believed the best in people, trusted promises and handshakes. His jaw tightened. That trust destroyed him. He invested everything, fortune, properties, reputation, in men who turned out to be swindlers. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. He died ruined, humiliated, his name stained. Olivia felt her heart clench. Dorian. I was 21. He continued as if she hadn't spoken, as if the words needed to come out. I inherited not a prosperous dukedom, but ruins and debts that stretched for miles. It took me 10 years to rebuild everything. 10 years of relentless work, of decisions some would call cruel, of never, ever trusting anyone completely. The silence that followed was broken only by the crash of thunder that shook the windows. That's why you are the way you are, Olivia said softly. So controlled, so determined never to lose. Because loss is the one luxury I cannot afford. She took a step toward him. But living like that, isn't that living without losing? He finally looked at her, and there was such vulnerability in those grey eyes, it took her breath away. You speak as if there is an alternative. There is. Olivia set her glass aside, closing the distance between them. It is called trust. It is called letting someone in, even knowing it might hurt. And would you do that? His voice was rough. Would you let someone in, knowing the risk? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Olivia took a deep breath. My mother died when I was 7. A fever that came suddenly took her in 3 days. The words came out with difficulty, as if they had been trapped for so long that they hurt to emerge. My father, he loved her so much that when she left, he simply disappeared, physically present but emotionally absent. I became a shadow in my own house, raised by governesses and tutors, invisible to the only parent I had left. Olivia? Dorian took a step toward her. I learned very young that love means loss, that opening your heart is inviting inevitable pain. She met his eyes. So I built walls. I became invulnerable, untouchable, because if no one can reach me, no one can abandon me. And now, he was so close she could feel his heat. Now, Olivia felt hot tears slide down her cheeks. Now I am terrified, because those walls I spent years building are crumbling, and you are responsible. Dorian raised his hands, cupping her face with a tenderness that sharply contrasted with his strength. I am terrified too. His voice was a husky whisper, because for the first time since I rebuilt everything from scratch, there is something I want more than control, more than victory. What do you want? You. The word was simple, absolute. Only you. The distance between them evaporated. Dorian leaned in, his lips inches from hers, and Olivia closed her eyes, her heart thundering louder than the storm outside. And then the library door burst open with a crash. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but the butler stopped abruptly, his eyes widening at the scene before him. Dorian pulled back so quickly that Olivia almost staggered. The frustration on his face would have been comical in other circumstances. What is it, Hendricks? Dorian's voice was dangerously controlled. There is an urgent matter in the stables, Your Grace. One of the horses is suffering from severe colic, and the veterinarian cannot come due to the storm. The poor man looked as if he wished to be anywhere else. Dorian closed his eyes for a moment, clearly fighting for composure. I will go immediately. He turned to Olivia. I apologize. This cannot wait. Of course. Olivia forced her voice to remain steady, though her whole body was trembling. Go. The animal needs you. He hesitated, as if there was something more to say. Then, with a look heavy with promise and frustration, he left the library. Olivia collapsed into the nearest armchair, her heart still racing, her body vibrating with the nearness of that unfulfilled kiss. She pressed her fingers against her lips, imagining what might have happened had they not been interrupted, and for the first time in her adult life, she wished the walls she had so carefully built would simply disappear. The following week brought the Grand Spring Charity Ball, the social event of the season, where the aristocracy could display their wealth while pretending to care about the less fortunate. The Pemberton's ballroom was decorated with almost obscene opulence, imported flowers on every surface, French champagne flowing freely, and an army of servants ensuring no glass remained empty for more than 30 seconds. Olivia wore a champagne-colored silk dress that flowed like liquid water around her, the neckline modest but elegant, the short sleeves revealing slender arms. Genevieve had insisted on styling her hair in an elaborate fashion, strands intertwined with small pearls that caught the light. "You look stunning," Genevieve whispered, as they observed the crowd. "Though I suspect a certain duke is the only audience you truly consider." Olivia blushed. "Don't be ridiculous." "Oh, darling, I am many things, but never ridiculous," Genevieve pointed discreetly. "And by the way, the audience in question has just arrived." Olivia followed her gaze and felt the air leave her lungs. Dorian was at the entrance, impeccable in black and white, but he was not alone. The woman by his side was stunning. Hair dark as ebony, a red dress that embraced every curve, and a smile that suggested intimacy with the man beside her. "Who is she?" Olivia asked, hating the tone of her own voice. "Lady Cordelia Ashton." Genevieve's voice was careful. "A widow, extremely wealthy, and according to rumors, interested in becoming the next Duchess of Ashcroft." Something cold and unpleasant settled in Olivia's stomach. She watched as Dorian and Cordelia circulated the room, he polite but distant, she clearly attempting to capture his complete attention. The evening progressed in a blur of superficial conversations and forced smiles. Olivia avoided Dorian, and he, curiously, seemed to be doing the same, until Lord Pemberton stepped onto the small stage set up at the end of the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cut through the hubbub, "as you know, the charitable portion of this evening will include a very special auction. Several of our lovely single ladies have generously offered to auction a dance. All funds, naturally, will go to the London Charitable Home." Olivia felt her stomach drop. She had not agreed to this. "Miss Evercrest," Pemberton located her in the crowd, "would you honor us by being our first participant?" All heads turned. Olivia had no choice. "It would be an honor, Lord Pemberton," she lied gracefully, stepping onto the stage with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Excellent. Who will open the bidding for a dance with the enchanting Miss Evercrest? Shall I start at £50? £100? Lord Hertford's voice came from the left. 150. Another gentleman Olivia didn't even know. 200. Hertford again, with a smile in her direction. Olivia kept her smile fixed, but inside she was dying of humiliation, being auctioned like prized cattle, having her worth measured in pounds. £1,000. Dorian's voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. Shocked silence followed. £1,000 for a dance was absolutely absurd, a bid that exceeded all sense of proportion. Pemberton blinked, clearly trying to process. £1,000 from the Duke of Ashcroft. Does anyone offer more? No one dared. Hertford looked at Dorian with reluctant respect and backed away. "Sold. To His Grace, the Duke of Ashcroft." Polite applause filled the ballroom as Olivia descended from the stage, her legs slightly trembling. Dorian met her at the bottom of the steps, offering his arm. "Your Grace is being excessive," she murmured as he led her onto the dance floor. He pulled her into the waltz position, his hand on her waist, possessive, firm. "Not when it comes to you." The music began, something slow, romantic. They moved together with a synchronicity that came from all those weeks of observing, desiring, resisting. "You didn't have to do that," Olivia said, keeping her eyes on his cravat instead of meeting his gaze. "Yes, I did." His voice was low, just for her. "Because the idea of any other man touching you, even in an innocent dance, was intolerable." "And Lady Cordelia?" The words escaped before she could stop them. Dorian paused his dancing for a fraction of a second. "Are you jealous?" There was masculine satisfaction in his voice. "Don't be absurd. Olivia," he made her look at him. "Cordelia is an old acquaintance, nothing more. She ambushed me tonight, insisted on entering with me. I said nothing because it would have caused a scene. You don't owe me explanations, but I want to give them." He twirled her, pulling her closer than was strictly appropriate. "Because you need to understand something very clearly. There is no other woman, Olivia. There is only you. It has always only been you." Her heart soared. "Dorian, say you feel the same." His eyes were intense, vulnerable in a way she had never seen. Say this isn't just me fighting alone against something impossible to resist. Olivia knew this was the moment when she could pull back, protect her heart, keep the walls intact. Or she could leap, trust, risk everything for something that could be extraordinary or devastating. She chose to leap. "You are not alone," she whispered. "God, help me, you never were alone." The smile that illuminated his face was like the sunrise, slow, warm, transforming. He leaned in, his lips brushing her temple in a kiss so soft it could have been imagined, yet it sent warmth through every inch of her. "Then stop fighting it," he murmured. "Stop fighting me, fighting us." And as the music enveloped them, and the ballroom disappeared until there was only the two of them, Olivia felt the last fragments of her defenses shatter. She wasn't just falling, she had already fallen. The question now was whether he would catch her, and whether together they could build something strong enough to survive the world that would try to tear them apart. Spring was at its height when everything changed. 3 days had passed since the charity auction, 3 days in which Olivia and Dorian existed in a delicate bubble of mutual understanding. They were not officially promised. There were no formal announcements, but something had fundamentally shifted between them. People noticed. The glances they exchanged across crowded rooms, the way he always seemed to find her even in crowds, how she smiled in a way she never smiled for anyone else. But London society had its own expectations, and not everyone was content to let Olivia Evercrest choose her own destiny. On that specific morning, Dorian was in his study at Ashcroft House, reviewing contracts for a recent acquisition, when his secretary, Mr. Pembroke, entered with a hesitant expression. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but—" The man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Speak, Pembroke. I have no patience for circumlocution today." "I received information from Lord Hertford." Pembroke placed a note on the desk. "He thought your Grace would want to know that Viscount Evercrest is receiving Lord Whitmore this afternoon to formalize a marriage proposal to Miss Evercrest." Dorian's world stopped. "What?" His voice came out, dangerously low. "Apparently the Viscount made the decision without consulting his daughter. Lord Hertford heard from Lady Evercrest herself during tea yesterday. He thought that, given the recent circumstances between your Grace and Miss Evercrest, you should be informed." Dorian stood up so abruptly that the chair almost toppled over. "When?" 4 o'clock this afternoon, sir." Dorian looked at the clock. 2:30. He had less than 90 minutes. "Have Tempest prepared." "Immediately." "Your Grace, the stallion is too temperamental for the city streets." "Now, Pembroke." The secretary hurried out. Dorian stood still for a moment, his mind working at furious speed. Whitmore. That man was 2 decades older than Olivia, widowed twice, both wives having died under circumstances that raised discreet whispers. There were rumors of a controlling temperament, of isolating his wives from their families and friends. The idea of Olivia in that man's hands made something fierce and primal roar within Dorian. He was not a man of impulse. He always calculated, always planned, but the image of Olivia being forced into a marriage that would slowly suffocate her set fire to all caution. He had to act. Now, 20 minutes later, Dorian was riding through the streets of London at a speed that caused pedestrians to draw back in alarm. First, he went to Whitmore's Mayfair residence. The butler tried to deny him entry, but Dorian simply walked past him. He found Whitmore in his library, already dressed for the occasion, clearly anticipating his triumph. "Langmere." Whitmore stood up, surprised but trying to maintain composure. "What an unexpected visit." Dorian closed the door behind him, his voice lethal when he spoke. "You will not be going to the Evercrest residence today." Whitmore blinked, then laughed, an unpleasant sound. "By what authority do you—" "By the authority of one who knows exactly what kind of husband you were." Dorian took a step toward him. "I know your wives lived in isolation without access to their own families. I know both died young, sad, and alone. And I know you seek not a partner, but a silent possession." Color rose in Whitmore's face. "How dare you imply—" "I am not implying. I am stating facts." Dorian leaned closer. "And I am offering a simple choice. Withdraw from this proposal, or you will face opposition in every business, every club, every salon you frequent. I have enough influence to make your life extraordinarily difficult, Whitmore, and I will do it with pleasure if you insist on this path." Whitmore stared at him, anger and calculation battling in his expression. Finally, he looked away, the submission of a man who recognized when he was outmatched. Evercrest has already accepted. The agreement is practically made. Then unmake it. Invent an excuse. Say you received an urgent summons to Cornwall. I don't care. But you will not marry her. There was a long silence. Then Whitmore nodded tightly. I will send a message. I will say an urgent matter arose at the estate. Wise. Dorian left without another word, but warding off Whitmore was not enough. The Viscount would simply find another suitor, and another until Olivia was sold to the highest bidder. No, there was only one solution. He needed to claim her, publicly, irrevocably. He mounted Tempest again and rode directly to the Evercrest residence. That afternoon, Olivia was in the tea room when her father entered, with an expression she hadn't seen in years, masculine satisfaction mixed with proprietary pride. Her heart sank. Olivia, my dear, I have wonderful news. Viscount Evercrest poured himself tea as if about to discuss the weather. Lord Whitmore will be visiting us this afternoon. Olivia placed her cup back on the saucer with excessive care. Lord Whitmore. She barely knew the man, but what she did know was not comforting. He has asked permission to formally court you with a view to marriage. Her father smiled. Naturally, I accepted. It is a solid match, Olivia. Respectable. Father, you cannot have accepted without at least consulting me. Consulting? He seemed genuinely confused. My dear, you are 26. You have already refused 5 perfectly suitable proposals, and now you are being seen in the company of that duke. The way he said duke carried disdain, not respect. Dorian is an honorable man. Dorian Langmere is a shark in gentleman's clothing. Her father set his cup down hard. Do you think I haven't heard the stories? How he ruthlessly rebuilds companies, buying ruins and turning them into profit, no matter how many families lose jobs in the process. How he is utterly ruthless in business. That is just envy from less successful men. It is prudence, Olivia, his voice rose, and there's more. I recently discovered that years ago, when Langmere was rebuilding his empire after his father's death, he acquired several properties at auction. One of them was mine, a small commercial property in Bristol that I had used as collateral for a loan when your maternal businesses failed. Olivia blinked, surprised. I didn't know, because it was humiliating. He stood up, walking to the window. I was vulnerable, grieving, and Langmere offered a fair price at the time. I accepted because I needed to. But then, months later, I discovered that property was worth triple. There were coal deposits that were not mentioned. He knew, Olivia, he knew and took advantage of my ignorance and pain. Dorian would never. He is a businessman above all else. Her father turned to face her. And when he looks at you, I see the same calculating look. You are another acquisition for him, another prize, and I will not allow my daughter to be used as he used my property, bought for less than she is worth and discarded when she no longer serves his purposes. You are wrong about him. I am trying to protect you. He took a deep breath, regaining composure. Whitmore is not perfect, but he is safe, predictable. He will not destroy you in the way Langmere inevitably will when he tires of his new toy. I will not marry Whitmore. Then you will have no choice in the matter. His voice hardened. 4 o'clock, Olivia. Dress appropriately. And as for that orphanage, if you insist on this stubbornness, I will reconsider. All financial support, do you understand perfectly? He left. The following hours passed in anguish. Olivia tried to form a plan. Write to Dorian, flee, anything. But every option seemed impossible. At 3:45, she was dressed in modest lavender, hair severely pinned up, sitting in the drawing room like a prisoner awaiting sentence. Her stepmother was present, silent. Her father checked his watch constantly. 4 o'clock came and went. 15 minutes late became 30. And then, at 37 minutes past 4, there was a commotion. At the entrance, raised voices, the butler protesting, and the room door flew open. Dorian Langmere entered looking as if he had ridden at dangerous speed, hair tousled, cravat crooked, something fierce in his eyes. Your Grace. Her father stood up, fury contained in his voice. This is highly irregular. We are expecting... Lord Whitmore will not be coming. Dorian's voice was absolute. I had a conversation with him this morning. A conversation in which I persuaded him to reconsider his proposal. The silence that followed was thick. Of course you did. The Viscount practically spat. Because men like you cannot resist interfering, manipulating situations to your advantage. exactly as you did with my property in Bristol." Dorian remained still, only his eyes moving to meet Olivia's. In that gaze she saw recognition. "I have come to ask for your daughter's hand in marriage." The room exploded. Olivia's stepmother gasped. Her father took a step toward Dorian, hands shaking. "By what authority?" The words came out as a growl. "You who profited from my pain, who made a fool of me when I was most vulnerable." "By the authority of a man who loves her." Dorian's voice was firm. "And who will be loved in return, or there will be no peace for any of us." "Love?" Her father laughed bitterly. "Men like you do not love. You calculate, manipulate, acquire. My daughter is not one of your failed companies to be bought." "Father, enough." Olivia stood up. He turned to her. "Would you choose this man, knowing he took advantage of our family when we were weak?" Olivia looked at Dorian, seeing not manipulation but raw desperation. "I need to hear from him first." Her voice trembled. "Dorian, the Bristol property, is it true?" He did not look away. "Yes, I bought that property 8 years ago, when I was rebuilding everything after my father's death. I paid the fair market price at the time." He took a deep breath. "I discovered the coal deposits months later, by accident during a routine inspection. I had already sold the property to another investor when I found out. Your father is correct. If I had known before, I might have offered more. But I didn't know, Olivia. It was not deliberate manipulation. Convenient lies." Her father spat. "They are not lies. I have the sales records, the original appraisals, everything." Dorian finally shifted his gaze from her to face him. "And if you research, you will find that the man I sold it to made a fortune from that coal. I could have kept it, but I was focused on other acquisitions. It was just business that cost me a fortune. And I am sorry for that. Genuinely." Dorian's voice softened. "But I cannot change the past. I can only promise that I love your daughter enough to spend the rest of my life proving that she is not a transaction. She is everything." The Viscount looked between them, anger still burning. "No, I will not allow it. Whitmore or another, but not you, Langmere. Never you." Olivia felt something break inside her. She looked at her father, this man who had raised her, but who now suffocated her with his own resentment. "Then you are giving me no choice." Her voice came out firm. "Because I choose Dorian. I choose love over bitterness, future over past." Her father's expression hardened. "If you walk out that door with him, do not expect to be welcomed back. Do not expect inheritance, support, or any connection to this family. And your orphanage, it will not see another penny." "The orphanage will be funded by me," Dorian said immediately. "Completely, generously, for as long as it is needed." Olivia looked at Dorian, then back at her father. The choice was clear. "Father, I will fetch a few things. I will be ready in 20 minutes. Her stepmother finally spoke, voice trembling. "Olivia, please, don't do this. I'm sorry, Odette, but I must live my own life." She touched the older woman's arm. "I hope one day you understand." She hurried upstairs to her rooms, with Dorian waiting at the entrance under her father's furious gaze. With trembling hands, Olivia packed a small valise with essentials, a few dresses, personal items, her grandmother's pearl necklace that was on her dressing table. 20 minutes later, she was descending the staircase, valise in hand. Dorian met her on the bottom step, taking her valise. "Are you sure?" he whispered. "You can still change your mind. I have never been more certain of anything in my life." They turned toward the door. Her father stood there, face red, fists clenched. "Olivia Margaret Evercrest, if you walk through that door, then I will walk through it as you raised me to be, father." She faced him, strong enough to make my own choices. "I only hoped they would be choices you approved of, but I have learned that I cannot live for the approval of others, not even yours." And then, with her hand firmly clasped in Dorian's and her modest valise carrying only the essentials, she crossed the threshold, leaving behind the life carefully constructed by others. Dorian's carriage waited. He helped her inside, placing the valise carefully beside her, then joined her. When the carriage began to move, Olivia looked out the window one last time. Her stepmother was at the door, tears on her face, a hand raised in silent farewell. Her father was not visible. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice trembling only slightly. "My estate in Richmond." Dorian enveloped her hand in his. My sister Catherine arrived from Bath this morning. I arranged it as soon as I heard about Whitmore. She will stay with us as a chaperone until we can be married. Your reputation will be preserved, Olivia, I promise." Olivia nodded, processing. He had thought of everything. "You didn't have to do that. Confront Whitmore, risk scandal." "I did." He pulled her into his arms. "Because the alternative was losing you. And that, Olivia Evercrest, is something I am not willing to allow." She leaned into him, letting the tears finally fall. Tears of loss, of relief, of fear, of hope. "My father may never forgive us. Then we will build our own family." He kissed her hair. "One based on choice, not obligation, on love, not resentment. I'm afraid. I am too." The raw honesty in his voice comforted her. "But we will face it together. Always. Together." The carriage continued through the landscape as the sun began to set. And despite the fear, despite the pain of leaving her family, Olivia felt something grow in her chest. Freedom, choice, future. She had taken the most terrifying leap of her life, and Dorian was there to catch her. Now together they would discover what came next. The following week passed in a whirlwind of preparations that defied all social conventions. Dorian had obtained a special license from the Archbishop, allowing them to marry quickly and without the traditional banns that would have taken weeks. The ceremony would be small, intimate, only the closest friends and those who genuinely cared about their happiness. Olivia was in the guest suite at the Richmond estate, looking out the window at the gardens bathed in the golden afternoon light. Her wedding dress hanging behind her was simple ivory silk, without the excesses that fashion dictated, but elegant in its clean lines. She had chosen it personally, refusing the pomp that did not align with who she truly was. Genevieve entered without knocking, as she always did, carrying a small box. "Your stepmother sent this." She placed the box on the dressing table, her voice careful. Olivia turned, surprise crossing her face. "My stepmother? Apparently Lady Odette is not as aligned with your father as you thought." Genevieve opened the box, revealing a delicate pearl necklace. "These belong to her, grandmother. She wanted you to wear them, as a silent symbol of the love she feels for you." Olivia touched the pearls with trembling fingers, emotion tightening her throat. She didn't come, no, but she sent her blessing in the only way she can, without openly defying her husband. Genevieve moved behind Olivia, starting to clasp the necklace. "Sometimes love comes in silence, Liv, no less real for not being shouted." Olivia nodded, swallowing tears. "I'm nervous, Jenny, as you should be. You're about to marry a man who turns your life upside down. What if I'm not good at it? Marriage, commitment, being a duchess?" Olivia turned to face her friend. "I spent so long fighting for independence. What if I lose myself?" Genevieve took her hands, squeezing firmly. "You won't, because the man waiting for you downstairs doesn't want a diminished version of who you are. He wants you, all your strength, all your stubbornness, all your complicated glory." She smiled. "And any man who bids £1,000 just for the privilege of dancing with you is not interested in domestication." Olivia laughed, the sound wet but genuine. "When did you get so wise?" "I always was. You were just too busy being brilliant to notice." Downstairs in another part of the estate, Dorian was having a similar conversation with Sebastian Thorne, who had served as witness and confidant throughout this crazy journey. "Are you sure about this?" Sebastian asked, though there was a smile in his voice. "There's still time to run out the back door." Dorian adjusted his cravat for the 5th time, his hands not completely steady. "I've never been so sure of anything in my life. And yet you're nervous as a schoolboy." "I am not nervous." Sebastian laughed openly. "My friend, I've known you for 15 years. You are absolutely terrified." Dorian stopped fiddling with his cravat, turning to face Sebastian. "What if I'm not enough? What if I can't? Give her the life she deserves, the freedom she needs, the love that—" "Dorian." Sebastian placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've spent your whole life building empires, rebuilding fortunes, winning impossible battles. And yet here you are, shaking, because you finally found something that truly matters. That's not weakness, sir. It's the strongest thing you've ever done. Surrender." "Choice," Sebastian corrected. "There's a difference. Surrender implies defeat. You simply chose. That winning her heart is worth more than protecting your own." Dorian was silent for a long moment, processing the truth in those words. "She scares me, Sebastian. The intensity of what I feel. It's like constantly being on the edge of a precipice. Welcome to marriage, Sebastian smiled. It's terrifying and exhilarating, often at the same time, but with the right person. It's worth every moment of fear. The private chapel on the estate was small, intimate, bathed in soft light, filtering through old stained glass windows. There were no crowds, no display of wealth or power, just the people who truly mattered. Sebastian, Genevieve, Lady Catherine, Dorian's sister who had immediately embraced Olivia as family, Mrs. Fletcher from the orphanage with tears already streaming down her face, and half a dozen of other true friends. Dorian waited at the altar, and when the doors opened and Olivia appeared, he felt as if all the air had been sucked from his lungs. She was radiant, simple, and absolutely perfect, walking alone down the aisle because she had refused to be given away as property. When she reached him, he held out his hand, and she took it without hesitation. The vicar began the traditional ceremony, but when it came time for the vows, Dorian raised a hand, gently interrupting. "Excuse me, Reverend, but I prefer my own words, if you permit." The vicar blinked, then nodded with an understanding smile. Dorian turned fully to Olivia, holding both her hands, his eyes fixed on hers. "Olivia Evercrest, you entered my life as a storm, challenging, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. You destroyed every assumption I had about what I could want, about who I could love." His voice was steady yet charged with emotion. "I promise never to underestimate your mind, never to diminish your strength, and always to be the worthy adversary you deserve. I promise to challenge you when you need to be challenged, to support you when you need support, and to love you in every moment between the two. I promise that our marriage will be a partnership of equals, that your voice will carry the same weight as mine, that your ambitions will have the same value. And I promise to spend every day proving that you made the right choice in choosing this path with me." There were unashamed tears in his eyes when he finished, and more than one person in the chapel was discreetly wiping their own eyes. Olivia squeezed his hands, her own voice trembling slightly as she began. "Dorian Langmere, you taught me that strength does not come from walls we build, but from the courage to tear them down. You saw through every defense I erected, and instead of using that sight as a weapon, you used it as a bridge." She smiled through her tears. "I promise never to stop challenging you, to make you question, to keep you honest. I promise to bring all my truth to this marriage, the beautiful parts and the difficult parts. I promise to trust you with my fears, my dreams, my heart that I guarded so carefully for so long, and I promise that, no matter how many years pass, I will always see you as I see you now, not as a duke or an empire, but as the man who chose to love the real woman behind the elegant facade. When they exchanged rings, simple, unadorned gold bands, when the vicar finally declared them husband and wife, when Dorian pulled her into a kiss that was tender and passionate and a promise of everything to come, Olivia felt something settle deep in her soul. This was the right choice. This was her place. This was her person. The celebration afterward was small but joyful, filled with genuine laughter and happiness that needed no pomp to be real. And when night finally fell and the guests departed, as Dorian led Olivia up the stairs to the chambers they would now share, she felt nervousness and anticipation mingling in her chest. He closed the door gently behind them, and for a moment they simply stood there looking at each other in the soft candlelight that had been lit around the room. "Are you all right?" Dorian asked, giving her space, always respectful, always thoughtful. Olivia moved closer, placing a hand on his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart. "I am more than all right. I am where I belong." He covered her hand with his. "There is no rush, Olivia. We have an entire lifetime." "I know," she smiled, something teasing entering her eyes. "But I also know what I want, and what I want is you, completely, no more barriers, no more hesitation." Desire darkened his eyes, but there was still care there, still that tenderness that always disarmed her. "Then have me," he whispered, leaning in to capture her lips in a kiss that quickly deepened into something more urgent, more necessary. That night, between whispers and promises exchanged in the candlelight, between touches that explored and discovered, between moments of soft laughter and silences heavy with meaning, Dorian and Olivia learned that the true victory was not in conquering each other, but in surrendering together. It wasn't about control or power, but about choosing, in every moment, to choose to be present, to choose to be vulnerable, to choose to love with everything they had, and when dawn arrived, painting the room in shades of pink and gold, when they awoke, intertwined and satisfied and completely transformed, both knew with absolute certainty that this was only the beginning of a game that would last forever, not a game of win and loss, but of continuous growth, constant discovery, and love that deepened with every passing day. 6 months slid by like silk. The initial scandal of their rushed marriage had subsided, replaced by genuine curiosity about the unusual couple. A duke known for his coldness, who clearly adored his intelligent wife, and a woman who refused to conform to the expected roles of a duchess. Olivia had transformed her position not into a gilded cage, but into a platform. She not only oversaw the House of Hope, now expanded to 3 additional buildings, but had begun organizing other women of the aristocracy, those who, like her, longed for purpose beyond tease and gossip. Together, they had established educational programs, skills workshops, opportunities that truly changed lives. Dorian, to the surprise of many and Olivia's delight, proved to be a husband who kept his promises. He consulted her on business decisions, valued her opinion, and never, not once, suggested she should be anything less than she was. On that specific October morning, Olivia was at the new headquarters of the House of Hope, overseeing the final touches for the official inauguration. The building was magnificent, 3 stories of pale stone, wide windows that let in abundant light, proper classrooms, comfortable dormitories, even a small library. "It's perfect, miss. Forgive me, your grace." Mrs. Fletcher corrected herself with a smile. "I still stumble over the title. Olivia, please." She touched the older woman's arm. "Always Olivia to you. The children are so excited. They can barely wait to show what they've learned at the ceremony." Olivia smiled, but then a wave of dizziness hit her. She discreetly leaned against a nearby table, taking a deep breath. "My dear." Mrs. Fletcher was instantly by her side. "Oh, you're pale." "I'm fine, just this has been happening lately. Morning dizziness, a certain sensitivity to smells." Mrs. Fletcher studied her with knowing eyes, then a slow, wise smile spread across her face. "Oh, my dear, haven't you realized yet?" "Realized what?" "When was your last—" Understanding hit Olivia like lightning. Her last monthly cycle. She tried to remember, to count weeks. 6? 7? "Oh," the word came out as a sigh. "Oh, I think perhaps you have one more person to share this special moment with today." Mrs. Fletcher squeezed her hands, her eyes twinkling. "Congratulations, dear. The inauguration ceremony was beautiful. Children recited poems they had learned, showcased handicraft, sang with off-key but heartfelt voices. Local dignitaries gave speeches, praising the vision and dedication required to create such an institution. But Olivia barely registered anything. Her hand kept going to her stomach, still flat, still visibly unchanged, but carrying the most precious life she could imagine. Dorian was by her side, having arrived directly from London for the ceremony. He had noticed her distraction, the way she touched her stomach, and there was a question in his eyes that she wasn't quite ready to answer in public. When they were finally alone in the carriage heading back home, he couldn't hold back any longer. "Are you going to tell me what's bothering you?" His voice was gentle, worried. "Are you ill? Do we need a doctor?" Olivia took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "I'm not ill, She met his eyes, a smile beginning to form. "I'm expecting a baby." The world seemed to stop. Dorian became completely still, his eyes widening, his mouth opening, but no sound coming out. We, he finally managed. "A baby? A baby," she confirmed, laughing at the absolutely shocked expression on his face. "It seems you won our wager, Your Grace." He blinked, confusion adding to the surprise. "What wager?" "The original one, a month of my company." She touched his face. It turned out to be a lifetime. The smile that spread across his face was incandescent. "No, my dear." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "We won together, and this is just the first of many prizes." She laughed, the sound full of pure joy. "Many? How many children are you planning exactly?" "As many as you wish." He kissed her softly. "Or none besides this one, if that is what you choose. What matters is not the number, Olivia. It's that each one will be loved, wanted, free to be who they are, just as you are free to be who you are." "Tears. Hormones," she decided. definitely hormones, filled her eyes. How did I get so lucky to find you? Luck? He laughed. My love, you provoked me at a ball, me challenged me at a card game, and turned my life completely around. That wasn't luck. That was destiny doing its job. She nestled against him, feeling his heart beat steady and true beneath her cheek. I love you. The words still filled her with wonder, even after 6 months of saying them daily. More than I thought it was possible to love anyone. And I love you. He kissed the top of her head. You. And now this little miracle that has barely begun. Our family, Olivia. Our chosen family, built on love instead of obligation. The carriage continued through the autumnal landscape, carrying them back to the estate that had become their sanctuary. And as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them there. She thought of the woman she had been, so determined to be invulnerable, so certain that strength meant solitude. And she looked at the woman she had become, still strong, still challenging, but now understanding that true courage lay in opening her heart, in trusting another, in building something together instead of alone. The game that had started that night at the ball, a foolish wager, a reckless provocation, had turned into something neither of them could have foreseen. It wasn't about victory or defeat. It was about finding someone who made you want to be better, to do more, to love more deeply. And as the carriage turned into the long drive of the estate, as Dorian squeezed her hand and smiled that smile that was reserved only for her, Olivia knew that all the difficult choices, all the risks, all the moments of fear were absolutely worth every second, because she hadn't just found love. She had found partnership. She had found home. She had found the place where she could be completely herself and be loved, not despite it, but exactly because of it. And when he helped her out of the carriage, when he pulled her in for one more kiss under the twilight sky, when he whispered promises of endless tomorrows, she knew that this story, their story, was far from over. It was just the next chapter in a life they would continue writing together, one choice at a time, a deep and true love guiding every word. Now tell me, would you have the courage to make the wager that Olivia made? Leave your answer in the comments. Share with someone who needs to believe that risking everything for love is worth it. And if you want more stories of irresistible dukes and women who do not bow down, subscribe now and join our community of romance lovers. Your next favorite book is just a click away.